Welcome back to Hardware Unboxed. Today we're checking out the latest budget 1440p gaming monitor from Pixio, a brand that we've recommended a couple of times previously in this very category. Over the years we've checked out the PX7 Prime and the PX277 Prime, and now we're back to check out their latest iteration, the PX277 Pro. At the time, the PX277 Prime, so the previous model, was an excellent value 1440p 165Hz gaming monitor, but as we sit here in 2022, it does use a last generation panel that can't quite keep up with the latest hardware. The PX277 Pro is looking to correct that. It receives an upgrade to a fast IPS panel with better response times and other advantages like a wide 96% DCI-P3 color gamut. It's still a 27-inch monitor with a 2560 by 1440 resolution and 165Hz refresh rate, but it should now be able to keep up with the other great monitors of today like the M27Q and 27GP83B. As for pricing and availability, Pixio sell their monitors in a handful of countries worldwide now, and this particular monitor is starting at $370 US, which is a pretty typical price for a mid-range monitor in 2022. Provided performance holds up, it could be a decent value option, although it also faces extremely strong competition. The budget 1440p class has never been more stacked with options.
Today's sponsor spot is brought to you by Gigabyte and their brand new range of Intel B660 motherboards. A particular favourite of ours is the B660M Aorus Pro AX, as this micro ATX board really does pack it all. A powerful VRM comprised of a dozen 60A power stages, complete with impressive looking and very effective aluminium heatsinks. There's loads of USB ports on the I/O panel, Wi-Fi 6, Intel 2.5 gigabit LAN, and plenty of onboard expansion options. Also, Gigabyte has a competition running right now to win a free Aorus upgrade, so please do check the link in the video description.
If you've seen an entry-level or mid-range gaming monitor before, you probably know what to expect here from the PX277 Pro's design. Almost the entire build is simple black plastic, with the exception of the stand legs, which are black metal. The color scheme allows this display to fit in with most gaming setups, but it's nothing particularly special, and the overall build quality I'd describe as average. The rear of the display does feature a few interesting shapes and angles, which I quite like, to be honest, and it's not the usual crazy gamer-style patterns and stuff, which is refreshing to see. Pixio have also managed to include a small RGB LED element, a single strip offset to one side, which I guess is okay if you are seeing the monitor from the back, but it kind of offers nothing in the way of ambient lighting. It's really not something you'll see during regular use. The stand is fully height adjustable and comes with a decent range of ergonomic adjustments overall, including swivel and pivot support. Gone are the days of these sorts of monitors being able to get away with fixed height stands. Height adjustment is the bare minimum, and you actually can buy one entire Pixio PX277 Pro for the price Apple charges to upgrade their latest monitor to a height adjustable stand. There's an okay range of ports here: HDMI 2.0, DisplayPort 1.2 and USB-C. The DisplayPort and USB-C ports both support the full 165Hz capabilities of the display, but unfortunately the choice not to use HDMI 2.1 has led to the HDMI port being limited to 144Hz. However, it's not all bad news, as the HDMI port does support automatic 4K downscaling for consoles like the PS5, and the USB-C port supports 65 watts of charging, which is great for hooking up to a laptop over a single cable. The OSD is controllable through a directional toggle, although the feature set is pretty average and in line with what I've seen from other Pixio displays. However, I was pleased to see at least one new addition, a KVM switch, which seems to be the new hot feature for today's displays. The Gigabyte M27Q was one of the first monitors in this budget category that used a KVM, and now lots of others do as well, including this Pixio PX277 Pro. Moving now to response time performance, and the PX277 Pro includes 4 overdrive settings, the first of which is off. Performance here is pretty mediocre, only delivering a 10 millisecond average response time, although overshoot is basically non-existent. I have seen worse overdrive disabled performance, though I don't imagine too many gamers will be using this mode while playing at 165Hz. The low mode presents a substantial improvement, perhaps too large of a jump between two modes. With a 5.24 millisecond average response time, this is pretty good performance, although it does come with an increase to overshoot and a small amount of inverse ghosting. However, the overall cumulative deviation level is good at below 500, so this is the mode that I would be using for gaming at 165Hz. The two modes above low both aren't usable due to the level of inverse ghosting. Middle has quite a high rate of overshoot, as you can see here, and then the high mode really goes wild with performance that isn't suitable for real-world use. I would have much rather seen more balanced modes used across the offerings instead of 2 usable modes and 2 unusable modes. One of the issues for the PX277 Pro is how it handles performance across the entire refresh rate range, such as when gaming with a variable refresh rate. The low mode is decent for 165Hz and 144Hz, but when we get to refresh rates lower than this, such as 120 or 60Hz, overshoot and inverse ghosting do become issues. At 60Hz, this is extremely noticeable, and this is really why I'd have preferred to see more balanced modes, or at the very least, something between the off and low modes. What this means is that for adaptive sync gaming, the only viable option is to turn overdrive off. This leads to slower response times at 165Hz, but we don't get any noticeable inverse ghosting at lower refresh rates, which makes them usable. In particular, if you have a more mid-range graphics card where you'll more often be playing games in the 60 to 100 FPS range, only the off mode makes sense. Unfortunately, the conclusion here is that the PX277 Pro doesn't have a single overdrive mode experience. For high refresh gaming, you'll want to use low, and for lower refresh gaming, you'll want to use off, and there's clear benefits to each mode. It isn't unusual for a budget-oriented product to perform like this, but I think Pixio could have achieved better results had they better optimized the overdrive settings and not just included 2 totally useless settings. The other option is integrating variable overdrive, which I don't really expect from a product like this, but would have also improved the experience. Compared to other displays running at their highest available refresh rates, the PX277 Pro fares quite well. Performance is similar to the Nixius NX EDG27X and faster than the M27Q, although with more inverse ghosting. We're also getting relatively similar results to LG-based monitors such as the 27GP83B and S2721DGF, so this newer IPS panel is performing as I'd like to see from a 2022 display. It's also clear that performance is quite significantly improved over the PX277 Prime. We're going from an 8.67 millisecond average to 5.24 milliseconds, which is a noticeable step up. Pixio's poor overdrive tuning hurts them in other charts though. Looking at average performance, the PX277 Pro is only slightly superior to the PX277 Prime, and that's because we have to turn down the overdrive setting from low to off for adaptive sync gaming. It delivers the same sort of average response time to the PX277 Prime, but with less overshoot. This Pixio display is pretty similar to the M27Q overall, but is beaten by other affordable displays, such as the S2721DGF and 27GP83B, which are all quite a bit faster. Without tight overdrive tuning, the PX277 Pro falls short of what I'd have liked to see from this panel in cumulative deviation, which measures the balance between speed and overshoot. The PX277 Pro again isn't too far off the M27Q, but the Dell S2721DGF is 12% better, and the 27GP83B increases that further to 22% better. We do see a decent improvement compared to the last gen PX277 Prime. This new panel is 26% better in cumulative deviation, but I think there was more performance left in the tank here. At 120Hz, we had to turn the overdrive settings down to off to get a result without significant amounts of inverse ghosting. This hurts performance, and while it does have some competitors in the vicinity, it simply doesn't perform as well as other budget alternatives that we've been talking about. And again, very similar at 60Hz as well. Having some sort of overdrive setting between low and off would definitely have helped performance here. Input lag is fine with a processing delay below 1 millisecond. As far as medium refresh rate 1440p displays go, this one is not too bad for competitive gaming when also using the low overdrive setting. The only way you'll be substantially improving performance from here is to upgrade to something with a higher refresh rate, which these days will cost a fair bit more unless you're willing to sacrifice resolution. The PX277 Pro does support backlight strobing through an MPRT mode, however there are a lot of issues here. On the setting itself, there are no fine-tuning controls to adjust strobe timing or length, and it doesn't work below 100Hz or simultaneously with adaptive sync. Then the quality of the mode itself isn't great. There's visible double images caused by strobe crosstalk and red fringing due to the specific type of backlight technology used. So I would completely forget about the backlight strobing mode on this display. For color performance, we're looking at a very standard wide gamut experience. I measured 96% DCI-P3 coverage, which is right in line with what Pixio advertises. So this is giving us great coverage of both the regular sRGB gamut for SDR content and P3 for newer wide gamut content, or for increasing saturation on SDR content. However, there's no meaningful coverage of other common gamuts like Adobe RGB, so we end up with 74% Rec 2020 coverage, which is a mid-table result compared to other displays. While the color gamut is good, the factory calibration is not so good in some areas. The color temperature of the display is solid and reasonably accurate, so we're not seeing any significant color tint. However, the default gamma is too high, which leads to a high delta E ITP average. Basically, when the gamma is high, the monitor will often show content as being darker than it should be. The PX277 Pro also has the typical issue of being a wide gamut display that ships without an sRGB clamp enabled by default. Basically, when viewing most normal SDR content, YouTube videos being an example, the PX277 Pro will oversaturate that content in its default configuration. This can give a more vibrant image that some people like, but it's not accurate and it hurts Delta E performance. Compared to other displays, default grayscale performance is poor, with no attempt to use the correct gamma for a PC monitor. The display also suffers in color checker from the combination of this issue with an unclamped color gamut. So unfortunately, overall, the Pixio PX277 Pro has poor out-of-the-box calibration. This can be corrected to some degree using OSD controls. However, the PX277 Pro lacks an sRGB mode, so the improvements are limited to grayscale. Luckily, a few tweaks of the gamma and white balance controls can significantly improve this area of performance, but then when looking at saturation performance, the gains are less noticeable. To get the most out of this display, a full calibration is required. We used CalMan Ultimate, and the results are decent for both sRGB and P3 gamuts. However, the downside to relying on ICC profiles for accurate sRGB usage is that they don't work in every application. It depends on the exact software you're using, so hardware profiles are preferred, which this monitor doesn't have. Patreon and Floatplane members can download the ICC profile we created for this display. The PX277 Pro is a lot brighter than Pixio's previous 1440p display, the PX277 Prime. At over 400 nits, there is plenty of brightness for most use cases, especially combined with the matte finish you get here. Minimum brightness is also improved down to 48 nits, which is great for those using it in darker rooms. The PX277 Pro has a great contrast ratio for an IPS display, reporting in at nearly 1300:1. That's significantly higher than what we get from LG-based monitors like the S2721DGF and 27GP83B, and really, it is the primary difference in visual quality between those sorts of displays. The PX277 Pro is also better than the Gigabyte M27 Cube, it's not to as great of a degree, and all of these IPS monitors are of course destroyed in contrast ratio by other panel types like VA. Then we get to uniformity and viewing angles. No major issues here. There's a little bit of fall off in some areas with my particular unit, but uniformity can come down to unit variant, so as long as the general result is good, it should be good for others as well. The last section of our review is the Hub Essentials checklist, which assesses whether Pixio is accurately advertising this monitor's capabilities and whether the display meets basic acceptable performance metrics. At the top, the PX277 Pro receives a minor deduction for only including HDMI 2.0, limiting its HDMI port to 144Hz instead of the full 165Hz you can achieve through DisplayPort. It also fails to include an sRGB mode despite being a wide gamut monitor. The main deductions come in the next two sections. Pixio advertises a 1 millisecond gray-to-gray transition time, but this is really only achievable using loose test methods and with overdrive settings that are unusable in practice. This is misleading for customers. We're also not getting a single overdrive mode experience or decent backlight strobing quality. Pixio would have avoided quite a large penalty if they didn't advertise the monitor as being HDR capable. There is no actual HDR hardware here, the panel doesn't get bright enough, and there's no local dimming, so it's highly misleading to say this display can do HDR. It can technically accept HDR inputs, but it can't display HDR content correctly at all, so it deserves a few red boxes here. Luckily, the final section that covers panel defects and issues like pixel inversion came up all clear, so it's not all bad. The last couple of times I've checked out Pixio's latest 1440p budget-friendly gaming monitor, I've been really impressed with what they've brought to the table, but these days there is such fierce competition that it's hard to recommend a product like the PX277 Pro, especially at its current price point of $370 US. I think Pixio have lost their edge when it comes to value and bang for buck, which is a lot of what the brand was built on. The PX277 Pro would have made a great entry-level 1440p 165Hz gaming monitor. It's not perfect by any stretch, there are several limitations, but it is faster than the PX277 Prime they were selling previously, and it's got decent contrast and wide gamut support. Yes, it may not have the best factory tuning or calibration, but a lot of the basics are here, including a height adjustable stand and no panel defects. That's really what you want to see in a value-oriented product, and it would be a step up over previous products using older, slower IPS panels. But to be an entry-level 1440p monitor, the price should be no more than $300. That's where current budget monitors are sitting, like the Gigabyte M27Q. In fact, at $300 it would be a good challenger for Gigabyte's model. But at $370 US, Pixio have to contend with an entirely different class of gaming display. It's around this price point we typically see models like the Dell S2721DGF and LG 27GP83B. Now, neither of these displays is as good as the PX277 Pro in contrast ratio, but in most other areas they are better, including motion performance and color calibration. Even if you have to spend $30 more on a 27GP83B like is the case right now, I think it's a better value product due to the performance and feature gap. Other options are just saving money and getting the very decent Gigabyte M27Q, or even going slightly more premium on the excellent MSI MAG274QRF-QD, which at times can be found for less than $400 US. Now, there is hope for the PX277 Pro, as Pixio often do quite decent discounts on their monitors over time. So if you're watching this review well after it's published and pricing has changed, well, it could be worth considering if it's one of the cheapest products on the market. But for most people right now, I think there are better monitors on offer with either stronger performance or more attractive prices. Anyway, that's it for this review of the Pixio PX277 Pro. If you're interested in buying one of these monitors or any of the other products we've been talking about in this review, we do have links to check prices in the description below. Also, if you want to support our independent monitor testing, it's well worth signing up to our Patreon or Float Plan accounts. You'll get access to things like our ICC profiles, monthly live streams, Discord chat, and lots of other stuff. So thanks for watching. I'll catch you in the next one.